Hello everyone, my name is Keith Sumption and I'm the Executive Secretary of the European Commission for the Control of Foot and Mouth Disease, and I'd really like to welcome you to the course which you're just about to take. North America is an area that has been affected by foot and mouth disease in the past, and I wonder how many of you have looked into the history, because it's quite an interesting history. The first outbreaks that are well recorded were in the 1870s, and actually apparently were due to animals moved from Scotland to Canada, and from then the disease spread to the USA. Now that's an example of a transboundary disease, 3 countries involved in one of the first outbreaks. At that time we did not have the OIE or the FAO or EuFMD, but we did have veterinarians, and those diseases were brought under control. And that happened several times in the 1870s and 1880s, which sounds a very long time ago. But the thing was, even then, veterinarians responsible in government learnt from those experiences that live animals and live animal movements were some of the most important things. So they brought in quarantines. But that wasn't the end of the story, because after that period, after disease in live animal movements had been brought under control, there were at least 7 other episodes. Now, how were they introduced? Well, some of those are really interesting and give us a lot of lessons. There was, perhaps well known to many people, there was introduction with garbage from ships that were somehow got fed to pigs, and that was a source of introduction in the 1920s. But perhaps even more surprising and interesting was the finding that fomites, that is hay, straw, halters, things used with animals on ships, were also the source of outbreaks. Understanding that disease is not just spread by live animals, but it's also contaminating the environment, it's a contamination of the things that were in the presence of those animals. And so that had to be controlled as well. But there's more to the story. In the turn of the century in the United States, there was an outbreak associated with contaminated vaccines. Not vaccines for foot and mouth disease, these were vaccines for smallpox. Vaccinia virus was produced in calves in Japan and introduced into the USA to make vaccines. It seemed to be contaminated with foot and mouth disease, and from that a big epidemic occurred. So even these most unlikely sounding sources were the cause of outbreaks. But even more so, perhaps involving Canada, was an interesting episode, the last in the 20th century, which occurred in 1951-52. Maybe you'll all look into that, because in that outbreak, for the first 3 months, that outbreak was misdiagnosed and was considered to be vesicular stomatitis virus. So veterinarians missed what was happening. For 3 months, outbreaks continued, and it took about another 3 months to bring it under control. That was associated with apparently an immigrant worker who came from Germany to Saskatchewan. So we have a whole range of things which are important. People, live animal movements, contaminated products, contamination moving through pigs, and also very much the role of inanimate objects in spread. So each of these early outbreaks were a source of information which taught veterinarians about the importance of early recognition, rapid response, and also to understand the human factors, the human role in disease spread. So we hope as you do this course, you'll be thinking, well, how likely is something like this to happen? Some of those very unlikely things did happen and are still happening around the world. We still see outbreaks associated with people that transport infection from one continent to another. We still see outbreaks initiated through pigs fed on swill or on waste food. We still see and increasingly are interested in how virus remains on inanimate objects, and that can be the source of spread. And of course, in many countries, live animal movements are not controlled, and those are the reasons behind the virus continuing at a very high level of burden in so much of Africa, the Middle East and Asia, from where people may be transferring to Canada, where people may be entering with virus on their clothing or on their feet, possibly in the products they're bringing with them. So these historic events really are just reminders. This virus has not really changed. It's still incredibly infectious. It's still very important to recognize the signs at an early stage and respond. And it's so important that that information is cascaded to the people who need to know, who need to be able to see it first in an abattoir, on a farm, in a sale yard, or in a veterinary practice.